I grew up in Harlem, right? And so at that time, this is before gentrification, and Harlem was very black. Like, it was just black people around me. And so I didn't necessarily think about my blackness because my whole neighborhood was black. Everything, every place I went, it was black. When I went to high school, it was a little bit different. I went to a Catholic high school. I went to Mount St. Michael. And so it was a number of different people there. But there were certain things that I just knew. Like, you talked about the talk.
Yeah.
Like, my parents gave me the talk. I knew how to walk into a store, not having my hands in my pockets, not walking too close to anything, always getting a receipt and stuff like that. And so I knew how I was supposed to be. I knew how I was perceived. And one of the things that I was told, and research later on, now that I'm a scholar, shows that specifically for black boys only get to be black boys for a certain amount of time, because once you hit a certain age, society sees you as a lot older and sees you as a threat, right? And so that came early, right, where you walk down the street and you're stopped by police just for existing, right? Just walking down the street. Where are you going? I walked out my house, I'm going to the store, right? But you always had to have an excuse, or rather an explanation
of why you're taking up space, yeah.
For why you're taking up space, right? And so you start to learn, what that means, right? And start to see yourself through this lens, like, damn, like, everyone sees me as this problem. And so how do you make sense of that existence and not internalize it?
I think in the beginning of my adolescence, like, I really fought hard against that narrative. I think we've had conversations about it. Like, I didn't want to fit the stereotype people had of me in their mind. So, like, I think I traversed the path of, like, code switching. Like, I was very careful about who I was around and how I was perceived in those specific spaces. So if I knew, like, I remember, I recall times, like, in middle school, like you're saying, like, I was seen as a man earlier on, where I was getting questioned by cops, or, like, teachers, like, people who knew I went to the school would still question me, and they would forget who I was after school and ask me where I was or why I was here, like, stuff like that.
I agree with what Esau is saying, but I think that as a black woman, for us, it's a little different. It's not like the physical threat, but more of like a verbal threat. So I find myself like really thinking about, okay, how am I going to say this or like express a concern without it seeming like I'm confronting someone. I always have to watch my tone, again, choose my words wisely, make sure that my emotions are always in check, even though I could be 100% correct. I had someone call me scary the other day, like say that they were scared of me. And keep in mind, I'm 100 pounds, 5 feet. Like, even if I was angry, like to the maximum, like, Godzilla style, like, what's the worst I could do? You know what I mean? So I'm listening to someone look me in the face, and this is another woman as well, who is a different race, and tell me that she was scared of me. And I could tell that, even though I'm like, there's no way she's actually scared of me, I was like, what if she actually is scared of me? Like, what if, like, the way that I came off, was too aggressive, or what if I don't know, maybe
You're like
wasn't
that, like, angry
yeah, I
black
wasn't
woman
portraying
trope.
myself the way I, meant to, even though I was 100% valid in my emotions.
I think about all the times people tell me that I'm intimidating, or why am I so serious, or why am I so angry? And, I would get that generally, but specifically when talking about conversations that's related to Black death and police violence, the question of why am I so angry, I think for me represented or reflected how little they valued Black life, and that was frustrating and made me angrier. And when I finally got to the point of not being so concerned about like what people are thinking about me, it was very liberating because I focused less on sort of like shape shifting, but that took a lot of work to get there. And I understand, having that community of people who feel like, at least for me, like, I know I have that community who actually, like, they see me. So I don't need to explain myself. I don't need to explain my passion, my anger, my rage. It's understandable and not questioned. But I think that is something that is really unique to Black women in the ways in which, like, we're positioned to have to only be a certain way. If not, then we're going to be the scary ones or so aggressive or intimidating.
I didn't even expect to get emotional like in this topic, but I think the hard part, the part that hurts, is hearing you say that like you can't be yourself in certain spaces, or feel like you can't be yourself in certain spaces. Like, that's painful, right? To say that you have to leave parts of yourself outside and only can be your whole self in certain spaces. Always having to think about the ways in which you are perceived like it's a burden. And the sad part is that it doesn't end